Good afternoon, all. Welcome to UBA Africa Day Conversations 2020, themed Growth, Jobs, and Sustainable Development amidst a global pandemic. We expect hundreds of thousands of views on this special convening. This convening will be in two parts. I will moderate the first session. Then I will hand over to my co-moderator, Eugenia Abu, who will introduce the eminent African ladies and gentlemen serving as panelists on the second session. In this session, we will be defining Africa's response to COVID-19, growth, jobs, and sustainable development amidst a global pandemic. We welcome our esteemed panelists, world leaders who have accepted to join this conversation today because we collectively agree that the priority for Africa must be safeguarding our youth and ensuring creation of jobs and economic opportunities even during this difficult time. Let me introduce the panelists for the first session. His Excellency President George Weah, President of Liberia, Senator Chris Coons, U.S. Senator and member of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Mr. Peter Mora, President, International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, Akim Steiner, Administrator, United Nations Development Program, UNDP, His Excellency Ambassador Georges Robelo Pinto Chikoti, Secretary General of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific States, ACP, Professor Oke Ben Orama, President and Chairman of Africa Export-Import Bank, AFREXIM, and Mr. Amir Ben Yamed, President and CEO of Africa CEO Forum. I thank you, our esteemed panelists, as we look forward to an interactive engagement this afternoon. Let me also recognize my good friends, Donna Kebruka, current High Representative for the African Union Peace Fund and former President of African Development Bank, AFDB, and Hasham Al-Arab, Chairman of the Board of Commercial International Bank, Egypt, CIB. I encourage our audience to ask questions throughout the conversation using hashtag UBA Africa Day Conversations and UBA Africa Day 2020 on all social media platforms. I will allow each panelist to share 60 seconds opening remarks before we begin interactive discussion in this order. President George Weah, Senator Coons, Mr. Peter Mora, Akim Steiner, Secretary General Chikoti, Professor Oke Orama, and Amir Ben Yamed. So let's start with President George Weah. President George Weah, you have 60 seconds, please, to give your opening remarks before we begin the interactive discussion. Over to you, please. You're muted, President George Weah. You're muted, please. President George Weah, you're muted. Yes.
Well, first of all, I want to greet my colleagues, the panelists, and I want to extend a special thanks and appreciation to you, my brother Tony Olumelu, and for inviting me on this panel in a very important discussion on the way forward COVID-19. I accepted this invitation because I know the importance and I knew that the world will be coming together to listen. So we share ideas, how we move forward from the COVID-19 and share ideas, how it affects all of us. I want to wish you the Africa Day today. And I hope that our deliberation will be in the interest of our people that's suffering from this pandemic, and then our discussion will be on the way forward, what needs to be done. So I'm honored. Again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Koons, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, my dear friend Tony, for the invitation to Your Excellency, the President of Liberia. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today as we talk about our global response to this pandemic. We have worked together well in response to previous pandemics, to the challenges of HIV/AIDS, of tuberculosis, of Ebola. And it is my hope that in the United States, where we are struggling mightily with this pandemic, we have as many Americans have died so far from this pandemic as there are reported cases on the continent of Africa. I remain, as you know, Tony, an optimist about Africa. I believe that it has a bright and strong future. And I look forward to our conversation today about how we can work together to make the investments that we need to make now in response and recovery to this pandemic, in building the foundation for rapid and sustained economic growth, and to invest in the youth of Africa so that we have a brighter future for the continent and for the world. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today.
Thank you, Senator Koons. Peter Mora?
Well, from my side as well, congratulations to Africa Day, and thanks to my co-panelists. I think from a humanitarian perspective, just a few points. We recognize today that pandemics comes on top of many other challenges Africa has. It is first a medical issue, but it must not be treated as a medical issue only. And if I look at Africa, our first challenge today are the secondary impact of the pandemic, the impact on the economy. So what is the response? I think twofold. We have to discuss, as Senator Koons said, how we cooperate together and how we can marry short-term emergency humanitarian assistance with innovative, community-built, private-public sector cooperations and partnerships, market creations, job creations. And I think we have to see and comprehend this response as a value chain to which each and every one of us has to add something.
Thank you, Peter. Akim, please.
Tony, thank you very much, Excellency President Weah, distinguished panelists. It's a great privilege to join you, Tony, and such an extraordinary group of people on the occasion of Africa Day. And I want to begin by first of all expressing my sympathies to all those who have already lost family members, friends, and colleagues to this virus. This global pandemic is in some ways still arriving in Africa. And I think a second observation is a great credit to many governments and the people on the continent of Africa of how they have responded to this challenge. Unprecedented, with limited means, but yet being able to contain the virus for the moment. But as we have seen, and this is why I'm so keen to join you for this discussion today, this virus has almost been overtaken in terms of a health crisis by the economic and social impact it is having on the continent. And therefore, the development gains of the last decades, in particular the last decade, on the continent of Africa are obviously now at risk in very human terms, in economic GDP terms, but also in terms of the future prospects. And therefore, UNDP is a proud organization with a long history of working alongside African countries and communities. And I hope that in today's discussion, we can find that perspective to the future that hopefully will also drive the kind of innovation that Africa has so often shown and that we are now all committed to trying to pursue in these very difficult times. So, Tony, thank you for the invitation and great to join you, and happy Africa Day.
Thank you very much. Secretary Chikoti.
Hello, good afternoon to everybody. Good afternoon to His Excellency President Weah. Let me thank you for inviting us to this meeting on the 25th of May, which is the Africa Day. I think it's very important that at a crucial time like this one, we have a meeting like this one where we can discuss about the challenge that Africa is facing with the COVID-19 pandemic. I think that as we discuss this, what will be important is to make sure that we come out of this meeting stronger. I think that Africa should show leadership in combating the consequences of the pandemic on our economies. Our societies have particularly been deeply affected by this pandemic. And as most of our colleagues have already mentioned, the fact that we have come out of this, we'll come out of this pandemic poorer and with more challenges to confront our upcoming societies. We've got to be able to look at the future with better perspectives. I think this meeting should be able to propose something tangible for our societies as they come out of this particularly difficult situation. Our societies have been affected in all areas of their economies. The commodity prices have fallen, fiscal revenues, foreign exchange receipts fallen, financial flows fallen, and it's a total disruption of our economies. So I think that as we discussed today, we'll be looking at how well we can respond better to make our youth be able to find better jobs or to be able to have societies that are stabler in terms of our social challenges. I think that this also allows us to be looking at the 2030 development goals, and I think that we need to look at how well we can come out with improved governance and looking at a better future for Africa. Thank you.
Thank you. Before Professor Rama, please, distinguished panelists, when we are not speaking, we can mute our devices so that it will interrupt. Okay, Professor Rama, please, your intro, the mic.
Thank you very much, my brother Tony, and let me also thank His Excellency President Ware and the distinguished panelists on this program today. We thank the UBA for creating the opportunity for us to have this discussion. Today is Africa Day. It reminds each and every one of us Africans of the collective need to be together, to reaffirm our faith in our continent and ourselves. This year's Africa Day is somehow overshadowed by the COVID-19 pandemic. But beyond that shadow, we must see the other positive message it brings. What COVID-19 has taught us is that there comes a time when every group of people fend for themselves. There comes a time when you must be independent. We hope, and I hope, that the message that this COVID-19 is teaching us about independence will help us to integrate our continent better so that we trade better, invest amongst ourselves better, and promote our growth and development as a people without always looking out for others to bail us out. I look forward to having a lively discussion today.
Thank you, Professor Rama. Thank you. Mr. Amir Benjamin. Amir?
Yes. Thank you, Tony, for this invitation. I extend my greetings to all the fellow panelists that are here with us today. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to share some of the private sector views on how to fend off this pandemic. But more than that, I hope we will be able to talk on how this how we can capitalize on this crisis to seize new opportunities and create new Africa, stronger economically, and above all, one of the themes which is, I think, one of the most important things in the coming month, self-reliant. So thank you again for this invitation, and happy Africa Day.
Thank you very much. Riding on what our great panelists have said so far, to add my own appreciation and commendation to the Group Managing Director and CEO of UBA, Mr. Kennedy Soka, for making this possible. We'll now go to Mr. George Weah, President George Weah. Your Excellency, in your viewpoint, as Liberia has fully recovered from civil wars and Ebola, how can African leaders finally use this opportunity, this crisis, to propel a new African order, where our economy is built on a more resilient foundation? Your Excellency. And I can add to that why you're saying not to say how are African governments supporting the African private sector during this crisis to create growth, jobs, and sustainable development. You're muted, Your Excellency. You're muted, Your Excellency.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Your Excellency.
Yeah, now. Okay, but thank you again, my good friend and Tony. Let me wish you an African Day again. I know this is your day, but I think how are African governments supporting the private sector during this crisis? Because that's the question. For us here in Liberia, our government, due to our government bilateral relationship and position, has allowed our government to mediate between banks, businesses, and other partners to manage loan repayment schedules and mitigate other financial hurdles, creating stimulus packages for citizens, which alleviate some of the financial and social burden placed on individuals due to slowdown in regular business activities. In Liberia here, we have taken some measures to ease the burden of vulnerable small businesses in the informal sector as well as big businesses. We are in the process of providing small loan assistance to petty traders and other marketers. In addition, we are working with commercial banks to mediate repayment of loans, because we know that the pandemic has shattered almost everything, and people lose their jobs, businesses are shut down. The only way they can grow is for us to help them and implement these things that are outlined to help them to gain growth. And also some of the things we did here were able to make sure that we didn't have total lockdown because we know that we're in a country where our economy is a tough time in our economy. And so we did not do total lockdown. We just eased by giving some time. People leave 6 o'clock in the morning to come back home 3 o'clock. And then, of course, because of the way that people, even in a short time, it's difficult for them to gain growth on the various produce. We had to make sure that we bring it to 6 o'clock so they can be able to work at least to be able to sustain while we're going through this pandemic. So that so far we're doing our best to make sure that they are sustained, because some people take loans from banks. They can't even pay the banks, and their market shut down. So we have to take the responsibility to make sure that we repay their loans, and also when they come back to the marketplace, they will not be running from banks.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you. Let me turn to His Excellency Ambassador George Chikoti of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States, ACP states.
Thank you very much.
The ACP states are most vulnerable to the pandemic, and their government face hard choices about where to direct our limited resources. Where and how, Your Excellency, should governments invest their limited resources to avert the worst and build a better future for our people?
I don't know whether I got you correctly well, but what I wanted to say is that we have been doing quite a number of things.
Okay.
At the beginning of the pandemics, through the Inter-ICE ACP, we have been able to release $25 million to all member states. Right now, we are still working together if we can release another $189.5 million to all members of the OACPS. So what I think will be the challenge is to make sure that all those most vulnerable countries should be able to receive as much help and support as possible. I was listening to His Excellency President George Weah, who is talking about what the government has been able to do in their regions. We have got to understand that in our regions, we have countries that have lost completely all their economies. That means, for example, the tourism industry, the hotel industry is completely collapsed. On the other hand, in most of the countries, we have a lot of people who are self-employed. And again, if you have these people at home, that means they will not work. So that means that food security has also been very much impacted. So I believe that what, as an international community, we have got to do is to see how well we can support countries and communities to be able to respond better, to provide food for themselves, but as well as they come back to see how they can get better jobs or they can get jobs and how we can help them. How can we fund all these efforts? I believe that one of the major challenges now is to make sure that in all countries we have improved governance. We've got a strong agricultural growth, including the reduction of, including high productivity. We've got to look at the employment and including skill set development that addresses the employment of youth and the vocational training of youth. We've got to improve the private sector that engages with societies, but as well it's important that there is peace and security in our countries. We can also digitalize better at a greater pace so that ICT technology becomes accessible in many countries. Last week, I participated in a jury that was selecting young people from across our countries in Africa and in the island states. And we felt that there is a very strong commitment of the youth to do better and to work. But these projects need to be funded. And I think that it's important that what we should learn from the impact of the COVID-19 is that the international community, the world at large, and particularly financial institutions can look at how well they can fund or support all these initiatives that can come from our countries. Because I believe that the impact goes beyond the responsibility of governments. Governments were unaware of what will be the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on their countries. And today the challenges that will come up are so high that they need more support, and probably we need to discuss a little bit more details in terms of detail to make sure that the private sector plays a good and big role, and that governments accept that it is indeed a challenge that needs to be lifted all together and across with everybody. We need to listen to each other and make sure that what we propose to our societies really get to those people who have been fully impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Tony. Again, a happy Africa Day. Can you hear me?
Yeah, as a member of the United States Senate and in your role as ranking member of the United States Senate Foreign Relations Committee or Subcommittee on Africa and Global Health Policy, I'd like to ask you, Africa in particular will require a large stimulus package to recover from this COVID-19. Do you support another Marshall Plan, this time specifically on a new deal for growth, jobs, and sustainable development in Africa? Over to you, please.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you to all the panel for the chance to be with you today as we both celebrate Africa Day and look forward to the future of Africa and its development. Before this pandemic, I have supported strong and significant investment in order to unlock the potential of Africa's youth and to provide for more robust growth and closer partnership. I think it is important first to take a moment and look at the ways in which African leaders have responded well and quickly, taking science-based actions to swiftly lock down economies and societies across the continent. And as a result, so far, the response has gone fairly well. Because of the lessons of Ebola, the African Union and the CDC associated with it, and the current leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa has resulted in an all-star team of continent-wide leaders who are pulling together both private sector and public sector responses. But I do think there is more that the United States can and should be doing, both on our own and in partnership with many other nations. First, in order for us to recover from this pandemic, we must develop a vaccine, and the vaccine has to be made very widely available in as free and as affordable and as easily distributed a way as is possible, so that there is optimism in the world that the economies can recover, that movement and economic activity can return. I am encouraged by the recent progress of the African CFTA, by the ways in which the African Union emerged from Ebola stronger, and I support the multilateral institutions that we will need in order for all of us to prevent future pandemics and to recover from this one. Your question, Tony, was more specifically about investment, significant investment. And as you know, I was a champion for extending and reauthorizing the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which gives the continent the opportunity to trade with the United States without the sorts of trade barriers typical in other places in the world. And something I worked very hard on recently was the creation of a new Development Finance Corporation, or DFC, that would unlock $60 billion in American investment in partnership with the African private sector and African governments to address growth opportunities. Last, I think that as the world's youngest continent, ways that we can partner to invest in and create excitement among African youth, such as the work that your foundation does around entrepreneurship, a group called Startup Africa in my own home state of Delaware that connects with entrepreneurial youth in Kenya and in other countries, are just two examples of ways we can and should do more for youth. The Young African Leaders Initiative, or YALI, that President Obama launched and that I have supported over many years now, is just one more example of ways that I think we can both invest in debt relief, invest in infrastructure, but also critically invest in the human resources of Africa's youth, who have tremendous potential to not just respond to and recover from this pandemic with innovation and creativity, but to lead to a stronger future for all of Africa. Thank you, Tony.
Senator Coons, I must thank you on behalf of Africa for all the support and leadership you continue to show in the U.S., especially in the Senate. I know this because when I testified in the Senate on the Electrify Africa Act, I know the role you and your colleagues played in making that, pushing that through. So thanks so much. Senator Kun, staying with you, in order to successfully flatten the curve, we need global coordination. How can we rebuild multilateralism in today's fragmented world? And what role should America be playing in building a global coalition to stem a global depression, which stares all of us in the face if nothing is done? Collaborate.
Well, I thank you for the question, Tony. I'm concerned about the ways in which President Trump has been pulling back from multilateral institutions like the World Health Organization. I recognize there are some concerns and questions about WHO's actions early in the unfolding of this pandemic, and some concerns about transparency by the country in which this pandemic originated. But frankly, this is no time for us to be looking backwards. I think it's a critical time for us to be pulling together and looking forwards. I had the honor of visiting Liberia during the Ebola pandemic. Strength and resiliency in this moment. The United States and China are currently in a fairly vigorous contest, and I think the best way that we could show the world that we have the best of intentions is if our nations were to model partnership in response to this pandemic. We have a critical need now for cutting-edge scientific research, for the development of therapeutics and vaccines, and for their distribution around the world. And if we show that organizations like the United Nations and all of its development organs and the World Health Organization enjoy uniform support around the world, I think that will strengthen confidence in the private sector and in countries around the world. And I think if we continue to fight endlessly and to threaten to cut off funds or to withdraw from multilateral institutions, I frankly think that diminishes America's role in the world. We are engaging in bilateral relief efforts around medical equipment and food supplies, but I'm someone who has long believed in the power of collective action. And on this Africa Day, I think it's particularly important that we recognize the power of collective action on the continent for the response and recovery from this pandemic, something that I think the United States should be supporting.
Thank you, Senator Kun. This is no time for finger pointing. This is a time for collaboration. This is a time for us to deal with the situation we have and also forge a better future for everyone, acting again collaboratively. Thanks so much, and please do not relent in the Senate. We need voices like you to shape the world and help us bring multilateralism back to this table. Now, let me go to my very, very good friend, Akim Stenner. Akim, the administrator of United Nations Development Program, and Akim is an esteemed partner here in this agency of the Tony Elumelu Foundation. We work together to empower we're committed to working together to empower over 100,000 young African entrepreneurs across the 54 African states. Akim and his team decided to start with the Sahel region, where they feel that our youth are quite vulnerable and that we must all act to create economic opportunity and hope for them. Today, working together, I believe we have impacted over 3,700 people across Africa, young Africans, giving them capital, mentoring them, and providing business education learning for them to do well, to help create jobs and usher growth on the continent. So he actually and his organization are at the forefront of this. Akim, I want to ask you, I've been very happy to participate in the roundtable session that you and your hardworking team and UNDP have convened and the productive insight that have come from it. What are some of the scalable opportunities that global and regional stakeholders should partner and support?
Thank you, Tony, and I want to also thank you for this partnership, because in the way that we have been able to focus our attention on young people also a recognition that on the African continent, the future of development is more than perhaps anywhere else in the world premised on what it is that we can provide to young people to be able to overcome the economic constraints of still developing infrastructure, training institutions, but also very basic poverty. And I think this is in part where we now have an opportunity. We have heard a number of times already in our session, and I think the whole world is looking to, on the one hand, as the United Nations, and we are all doing, trying to protect people, first of all, dealing with the pandemic, dealing with the virus. Secondly, to mitigate its impact, social and economic impact on people and economies, and then begin to think about how do we build back better. And I think when you take the backdrop of the poster behind you, growth, jobs, and sustainable development, on the first two fronts, we are facing an unprecedented crisis. I mean, growth is collapsing, jobs are disappearing literally in the hundreds of millions. And one thing that is a particular preoccupation, I think, for all of us on this panel and for anybody who is looking at the future of development, jobs that existed were actually in the informal sector. People were not employed in a formal employment relationship. 80 to 90% of people make their living, their livelihoods, literally in the informal sector. That means when you lock down an economy from one day to the next, you not only lose your income, there is no social safety net. And this has been a tremendous challenge, I think, for all governments across the continent. And here is perhaps the first scalable solution that is not only an emergency response, but we need to look more carefully also at the efficacy of cash transfers, temporary basic incomes. What is it that with relatively limited amounts of money we can do to address extreme poverty? Because people who are in a state of extreme poverty are so much more constrained in actually being able to invest in their children, having a little bit of income with which to invest in a business, be it a corner shop, be it a workshop. And I think here is a tremendous opportunity combined with training. And perhaps two more examples, Tony, if you allow me, that I think...
Go ahead, please. Go ahead, please.
That the virus has, I think, put a spotlight on. The health system across the African continent is still very uneven. Universal health coverage is not a reality. And let's be frank, it will be very difficult for governments to finance in the near future national health services that can essentially be funded just from the public purse. We need to look at intermediate steps, micro health insurance. This is where the insurance sector, working with governments, could massively expand the coverage for hundreds of millions of people to cover the major health risks. These are the things that throw people back into poverty, and 40% of people who escape from extreme poverty actually fall back into it, often because of health crisis. We need to also look at the education sector. We talked about training, entrepreneurial skills. The reality of what's happening right now is that hundreds of millions of children are deprived of their education. And I think we have learned very quickly that digital connectivity, as the ambassador also said, could be a crucial shortcut, a leapfrogging opportunity to connect all schools across the continent to the internet, allow that as a kind of educational safety net, but also really a trampoline for jumping forward. Again, we need investments here. We need partnerships between governments, between the private sector, communities, but also the international community. And I thank Senator Coons also for, in a sense, highlighting the importance of international solidarity. You know, we lament a lot at the moment about things not working, but the truth is solidarity is alive and well. In our communities, we've seen it in the way nations across the African continent have tried to help each other and globally. The multilateral system is not some abstract political design. It is the extended hand of solidarity from one nation to another. And in the 21st century, never have we been more dependent on our ability to act together. And if this pandemic has done one thing, it is to show that, yes, we do not have the perfect institutions. None of us have the perfect responses. But how on earth would we actually contain this pandemic if we did not have a World Health Organization and if we did not have a spirit of multilateralism in our ability to act together, help each other, and ultimately achieve growth, jobs, and sustainable development? Because our economies were not doing so well in terms of people's perceptions before the pandemic. We have much to reflect on. how to address inequality, poverty, lack of sustainability. And I think that may be where Africa will show us in many respects the way over the coming years. Thank you.
I like that. We're hoping to do so. On that note, let me go to Professor Oke Orama. Professor Orama, Afrexim President and CEO. First, on behalf of African private sector, I must commend the Afrexim under your leadership for your intervention of $3 billion to support trade and SME businesses through the African banks. What is most instructive and impressive about this intervention is that this happened in a matter of weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, from approval, processing to disbursement. This is the kind of intervention that small and medium-scale enterprises on our continent need, especially at a time like this. So we say, this is not just talking about development finance intervention, this is about practicality and direct impact. In that capacity, and on that note, I want to ask you, what are the economic policy options, in your viewpoint, for our governments to put in place to augment the intervention and good works of institutions like the Afrexim?
Thank you very much, Tony, again. The pandemic has shown so many weaknesses we have across our continent, not only from the point of view of infrastructure, but also the economic policies, the appropriate economic policies that will help drive growth and also help manage events of the kind we are witnessing today. Where we are is that there is a crisis. There is a crisis, but we find that in many cases, some of our governments are not very well prepared for them. Not prepared from the point of view of resources, but also the soft and hard infrastructure to deal with these kinds of situations. But if you ask me what should be the priority of our government, I think the priority of our government should be to make sure that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement gets implemented without delay. If there was any doubt about the importance of that agreement that our leaders so courageously put in place just about 2 years ago, this COVID-19 pandemic has told us that this is the way to go. So we have to put away all reservations we have so that we can build supply chains across Africa. This is the only way we can begin to foster dynamic growth in our continent. If we do not do that, we will remain perpetual commodity exporters. And we've seen what perpetual commodity exporters suffer when we have events like this. Oil prices have crashed. Not only did it crash, there was no market for it. Nobody was ready to buy them. Some metals also suffered the same fate. At the same time, countries and companies and individuals are looking for medical supplies, pharmaceutical supplies, certain kinds of food, but we did not have the infrastructure to produce them. We did not have the capacity to produce them. We were waiting to be supplied from outside, but the supply chains were all disrupted. So the AfCFTA is the answer, and we must waste no time. We must use this opportunity to overcome whatever challenges that we may have at our country levels and even collectively as a continent. Because when we start with it, we will then be able to gradually build the health infrastructure, build the manufacturing base, build the physical infrastructure that will connect us so that when we are confronted with events like this, we will be able to handle them. And we will be able to handle them because by the time we build all this, we will then begin to create bigger banks, bigger continental institutions. If I have a minute, I'll just tell you one more thing. In a continent of 1.2 billion people, 2.5 trillion in GDP, depending on how you measure it. If you take the largest developed finance institutions we have in the continent, the total aggregate total assets is less than $80 billion, less than 5% of that GDP. The Asian Development Bank alone has total assets of about $200 billion. So unless we create the infrastructure, create the market, create all those things that will make it possible for us to then have financial institutions that can finance the growth and development we need, we will remain vulnerable to the kinds of situations we have today, where although we do not have too much problem with the health issue, we do not have too many deaths, but Africa has become the epicenter of the economic devastation that the COVID-19 has unleashed upon us. Thank you.
Well, Africa has remained the epicenter of the economic effect of COVID-19 pandemic. Interesting. Okay, Oram, I want to stay with you and ask a follow-up question. Multilateral organizations have called for debt relief efforts to be stepped up. While this is good, what are some of the long-term solutions to prevent a cycle of debt accumulation and debt relief of African countries, given that not too long ago, we had debt cancellation and debt relief. And again, now we're almost like knocking again. What will stop this?
Well, just taking up from where I stopped, let me tell you how this debt came about. In 2006, Africa's total debt was somewhere about around $300 billion. Today is just about $1 trillion. The genesis, the increase we saw started with the first, initially, the commodity crisis that we saw in 2015, which then made many countries to run into all sorts of deficits, current account deficits, fiscal deficits, that made them now to start going again to borrow. And because many could have access to the commercial market, the bond market, and also access to other forms of borrowing, the syndicated loans market, apart from the usual sources, the bilateral sources, debt ballooned. So you see that the debt has commodity origins because the commodity prices crashed. The countries ran into fiscal problems, ran into current account problems, so they had to borrow in foreign currency. And this debt then built up. So if you want to get around it, you have to find a situation whereby you are no longer dependent so much on commodities. You now have to build a dynamic economy that is less dependent on commodities, but dependent on the kinds of goods and services which are not vulnerable to episodic shocks as we experience in Africa. I think that is the solution. The other thing that we need to do is to build a domestic capital market. Today, we have 55 countries. We have the stock exchanges are fragmented, not liquid, quite small. Many economies do not have strong financial systems. And I have never seen any country, any continent that developed without a strong financial system. without banks providing funding, without a diversified source of funding, growth, and development, Africa does not have it. If we then have a domestic source of financing our growth, we will depend less on borrowing internationally. We will depend less on others, so that this issue of commodity prices fall, we borrow so much, and then a few years after, we ask for debt relief, we will put to an end. So go away from commodities, develop your domestic financial markets, and you will put debt problems behind you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Rama. No financial system can develop without a strong domestic sourcing and funding for growth. I agree with you. This morning, I had a meeting with the Central Bank Governor of Nigeria, and a few other private sector people. And exactly what we're speaking about, and the Central Bank Governor, as usual, was sharing his passion about how to make Nigeria industrialized in the 21st century and leveraging the COVID-19, which is one of the reasons why we're discussing today. How do we move Africa to the next level in spite of COVID-19 pandemic? Let me go to Peter Mora of the ICRC. The ICRC is another partner of the Tony Elumelu Foundation. In fact, they were the first multilateral development organization to partner with the Tony Elumelu Foundation. Together, we have empowered vulnerable communities in the Niger Delta and the northeastern region of Nigeria. Peter, how have you rated the global public health response to COVID-19 pandemic, and what more can we do to minimize the effect of the pandemic? And what also, realizing the new focus of ICRC, not about dealing with post, but about stemming and making sure it does not happen. What are your thoughts in this area, Peter?
Well, I would say it's about combining the past way of doing with the future. I think if you look at Africa today, it is unquestioned that a lot of vulnerable populations have been heavily affected by the pandemic, beforehand by poverty and conflict. And unfortunately, for many of those, for women, children, the elderly, those with multiple health challenges, in particularly fragile and conflict-ridden places in Africa, there is no much alternative in the first stage to increase humanitarian assistance, emergency assistance, and to help them survive. But here, Tony, I think what has brought us together is that I'm deeply convinced that we can't stop there. We must do more than just life-saving. And I think that's where this discussion today is so important. I think two things need to follow after life-saving. First, and it has been alluded to in the discussion already, this pandemic has illustrated the weakness of systems, health systems, water and sanitation system, food systems, social systems overall, and we have to heavily invest, private and public sectors, into the stabilization of health systems. This needs new innovative finance. It can't be financed just over tax income. And so when I say stabilizing system, it is really combining our experience from frontline help and from frontline emergency assistance to translate it into long-term system stabilization. And health is, of course, in areas of pandemics, the first address which we have to look at. This is also the recognition and lessons learned from Ebola and other pandemics. We need to look at pandemics as part of a broader health systems which needs stabilization. The same is true for water, sanitation, basic infrastructure, and social services. Today, for instance, the ICRC is launching a pilot project on a humanitarian impact bond to finance water and sanitation system in Goma. I think it is important to combine our system approach with new innovative finance. And the second part is that's where we have cooperated in the past and we are eager to cooperate in the future. Investment has always gone into the more developed parts of Africa and not in the most fragile parts of Africa. And I think where we are interested is to stabilize the most fragile parts of Africa. That's where Tony Elumelu and myself partnered together in the north of Nigeria, in the Delta, in other parts of Africa, in the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa. And I think we need those private-public partnerships, those multi-stakeholder cooperations where we support youth, innovative youth, to build, to engage in innovations, in entrepreneurship, to build markets. We need to do that much earlier than we used in the past. We must prevent that humanitarian assistance just becomes a self-perpetuating system. And we have to design the pathway out. And the pathway out of dependency towards autonomy and self-fulfilling jobs and income is only going through partnership, innovation, investment in the most fragile context. And I think that's where the new type of partnership is so badly needed. And that's, I would say, the pathway we have to encounter. 3 words just to illustrate what is really opportunities today. The localization of work and attention through pandemics has rapidly accelerated. This is really tuned and tailored to African communities' resilience. Secondly, the virtualization for our work of Africa.
This is the network service of the NTA. This is about all we can take on this live broadcast. Our scheduled program is up next.
Eid Mubarak. I hope you're staying safe. Thanks for joining us on Nationwide today on the network service of the NTA. I'm Ruth Aguera. Welcome. Let's begin with the Eid celebration. Eid prayers were observed at various Jumat mosques across Bidda Emirate in compliance with the Niger State government's directive on the Eid el-Fitr celebration. Esu Nukwe and Chairman Niger State Council of Traditional Rulers Alhaji Yahaya Abubakar was among worshippers at the Usman Zaki Central Mosque Bidda. Jones Ajay reports.
Bidda Eid prayer ground was under lock, which prompted the Muslim faithful to observe the 2 Rakat Eid prayer at the various Jumat mosques. The chief imam of Bidda, Sheikh Adamu Yakatu, led the faithful in the prayer. Sheikh Adamu Yakatu prayed the Almighty to wipe away the global coronavirus disease. He asked the faithful not to forget all the lessons learned during the Ramadan fast and to also put it in practice. Eturupe and Chairman Niger State Council of Traditional Rulers Alhaji Yahaya Abubakar described the coronavirus pandemic as a trying period that God will surely bring to an end. Yahaya Abubakar implored his subjects to observe good personal and environmental hygiene so as to curtail the spread of COVID-19.
We hope and we pray Almighty Allah to direct our leaders, political leaders, to come out with a very, very formidable plan to ensure that all the sufferings that people have gone through actually are being catered for.
Yahaya Abubakar then prayed God to accept all the supplications offered during the just concluded holy month of Ramadan. Jones Ajayi, NTA News.
And in Benin, we hear there was security presence at the Eid ground and Central Mosque in Benin to avoid congregational prayers for Eid al-Fitr to ensure compliance on guidelines in line with safety standards. The ceremonial prayer was observed by faithfuls in their homes. NTA crew caught up with the worship in the home of the paramount ruler of the major Islamic town in Edo State. Let's hear from Agatha Egwari Ojo.
Security personnel stationed at the central Eid ground which was empty as usual congregational prayers were cancelled. The Chief Imam of Benin, Abdul Fattah Inabulele, wants the faithful to sustain prayers against COVID-19.
You can spread your mat anywhere and pray. No, it's not necessary must be in the Eid ground or in the mosque. Anywhere on the surface of the earth, do it. God will answer your prayer.
In Auchi, a town in Edo North, with the largest Muslim population in South Nigeria, there was no congregational prayer. The Otaru, Alhaji Haliru Momo Kelebe III, observed the prayer in his home with members of his family. He says it is the first time in his life to observe Eid al-Fitr with only family members. For the fact that people are still alive to pray at home is sufficient reason to thank Almighty Allah.
That we are here as we never had gathered before to appreciate you in our inner minds, in our conscience. We thank you. We know that you have blessed this nation. We know that you will continue to bless the nation. And we know that very soon ease will come.
The clergy says even though the month of Ramadan has come to an end, the people must continue to live a holy life and never return to those sins they abandoned during the fast. In Benin, Agatha Egwarojo, NTA News.
Well, some Muslim and Christian leaders in Plateau State say this year's Ramadan fast came with lessons of sincerity, honesty, selflessness and sacrifice to God and humanity. This was while felicitating with the Muslims on the occasion of the Eid al-Fitr celebration. Abdul Wahab Bankanti has the report.
In view of the COVID-19 pandemic, they charged Muslims to observe all laid-down safety protocols and guidelines issued by the authorities with a view to contain the spread of the disease in the country. For that, they urge Muslims, as they celebrate Eid al-Fitr, to continue to be law-abiding, have sober reflection, and exhibit the lessons learned during the period of Ramadan fast.
We pray that may the Almighty God accept our prayers and get us out from this pandemic that is ravaging the whole world.
The only way out of this thing is for everybody, and whoever you are. We have got to abide by the directives of what the authorities have asked us to do.
I would want to congratulate the Muslim Ummah for witnessing yet another Salah, and then appeal to them to please abide by the rules given by NCDC.
They salute the commitment of all leaders in enlightening their followers on various issues during the months, urging them to maintain the tempo even beyond the period of Ramadan.
Our priority as human beings today is love. Show love to one another. And if we have love, we can coexist with other people who have different views from ours.
They equally call for ceaseless and fervent prayers for the nation against the spread of COVID-19. In Jos, Abdul Wahab Bankanti, NTA News.
Globally, the 2020 Eid al-Fitr celebration was obviously a unique one this year due to the coronavirus pandemic that altered the known way of celebrating the festival in Nigeria. Well, in Nigeria, actually, Kano State has been identified as one of the states with high density record, and that was why the Eid was observed in mosques on the stipulated guidelines. Now, joining me via telephone is the special advisor to Kano State Governor on Media and Publicity, Salihu Tanko Yakasai. Eid Mubarak, Mr. Tankasai and Yakasai.
Thank you very much, and Barka de Sallah to all Nigerians.
Barka de Sallah to you too. What can you tell us about the mood of residents of Kano today being the second day of Salah?
Well, as you all know, the state government decided to allow for Eid prayers only, which took place yesterday after reaching some agreement on the protocols that will be followed for the Eid. As of today, we are back to the lockdown, which is today, tomorrow. That's Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday and Saturday. So the days of free movement is Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. So today we are back in lockdown. It was only yesterday during the Eid period that people had the opportunity to go out for Eid for just 4 hours.
Okay, so but how is the Kano State government marking the feasts this time around? Because we know in the past there will be homages and visitations to the governor and traditional leaders.
Yes, traditionally there are a number of activities that the state government engages in. But of course, this time around, due to the lockdown and the coronavirus, the situation has been scaled down seriously. So yesterday, after Eid period prayers, His Excellency went to the correctional center at Goran Duse, where he supervised the release of 294 inmates to mark the Eid celebrations. That was the only official engagement the state government has done. And then I think next tomorrow the governor will go around the graveyards, which is a tradition that he usually do, to offer prayers for all the deceased that have passed in selected cemeteries in the state.
Okay, what about children? I know usually there's this funfair for children. Can you give us a glimpse of the situation for children? I'm sure you have children too. Did you hear me, Mr. Yakase? Hello? Okay, we seem to have lost that call. That was the special advisor on media and publicity to Kano State Governor Salihu Tanko Yakase, just giving us a situation report of how Kano is faring during the Eid al-Fitr celebration. Let's go to Ekiti State, where Muslims in the state have been advised to continue to keep the rules guiding their conduct as exhibited during Ramadan. Ayodeji Ogunshake reports that clerics called for more support to check the spread of COVID-19 in the country.
And unfortunately, a lot of the kids that have not been going to school understand.
Okay, I think we have Mr. Yakase back on phone. So, Mr. Yakase, I don't know if you heard my question. We're going to move on. Actually, we thought we lost you on the call.
Sacrifices that have to be made.
Okay, so what can you tell us about children? There's usually this funfair for them. That was the question I asked earlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There's no anything specific or special for children.
Okay.
Of course, due to the situation that we are in. So the situation is that everybody should, both children and adults, should spend their Christmas, their Salah at home. And that's the situation.
Okay, what would you advise parents at this time? I know a lot of people want to go out and have a feel of the celebration outside their homes, but what's your advice to Kano residents?
Oh, my advice is for people to exercise a bit of patience, to continue to stay at home. There are so many ways to be creative at home and to create games. Have the children to feel that sense of the celebratory mood that we are in. Create special dishes for them, special games, and so on and so forth. Even visitation is not allowed, so you can understand that, or is not encouraged, so you can understand the need for for parents to be creative at home and make sure that their kids feel that Salah celebration that they used to, but it has to be confined within the walls of the house. So my advice is to talk to the kids, to make them understand that it is because of the lockdown, because of the coronavirus that we are in, and as such, everything should be indoors and no need for going out. At least that's what I have done to my kids, and I make sure that there's enough sweets and drinks to make them enjoy the Salah at home.
All right, thank you very much, Salihu Tanko Yakase. Thank you very much for your time. And Eid Mubarak once again.
Thank you very much for having me. Happy Salah to everyone.
All right. So let's take you back to that report on Ekiti, where the residents have been advised to continue to keep to the rules guiding during the Ramadan, during the way they conducted themselves during the Ramadan. Let's hear from Ayodeji Ogunshake.
This is one of the Eid prayer grounds in Nado Ekiti, the state capital. This particular place is usually jam-packed with thousands of worshippers to observe the two ceremonial rakats. But today, the narrative is different, as faithful stayed at home to observe the Salah prayer as part of the precautionary measures to curb the spread of coronavirus pandemic. This, however, took us to homes of some Muslims who observed the Salah prayer with their immediate family members. To the adherents, observing the Salah prayer at their homes is unusual, but since such is in accordance with the laid-down order by authorities, they have no option since it is in accordance with the directive of Allah.
Our religion also permits us to obey the constituted authority. We believe that everything that is happening to us globally, Allah knows much about it. It is high time we look into the face of Allah, seek the face of Allah over the pandemic that is ongoing.
It only shows the uniqueness of Islam, that no situation that will come that Islam cannot be practiced. So this is what it demands now, that each family should pray together and the head of the family should be the Imam.
Prayers for Allah's favor on Muslim Ummah and divine intervention for an early end to the pandemic were dominated at the Salah prayers. From Ado-Ekiti, Ayodijo Bishaki, NTA News.
In Aba, Muslims are busy with their businesses despite it being a public holiday to Eid al-Fitr. Beauty Ehubamian reports that, quoting them as saying that though it is an unusual celebration, they are grateful to Allah for seeing the day.
Here in Aba, the place is calm. Unusual times, you will say, because most of them are celebrating at home. They said though this is the first time they are doing so, they are happy because of the opportunity to celebrate another Eid. Although it is a holiday when they are expected to take a break, most of them are out there in their various business outlets carrying out their trade. So Sani and Mohammed here say they are not celebrating today because COVID-19 has put a strain on their businesses.
I have 10 children with one wife. No food. Even they stay at the house, children are crying.
In Aba, Beauty Ehubamian, NTA News.
Thanks, Beauty. Unusual times, unusual measures. Well, let me hand you over now to my namesake in Lagos. I'm sure you want to feel the pulse of Lagos residents on the Eid al-Fitr celebration. Ruth, it's your turn.
Thank you, Ruth. Eid Mubarak to you. Ensuring adequate security as the partial lockdown continues is paramount for the safety of lives and property. Lane Leneke takes a cursory look at enforcement in Lagos.
In the past few weeks, there have been fears among Lagos residents of threats to security, with pocket attacks on individuals and households in the current partial lockdown. The ultimate measures of good governance is the protection of its citizenry. Security operatives have endeavored to maintain utmost vigilance in enforcing restrictions and other security demands.
Most at times we advocate foot patrol or at most motorcycle patrols so that they move at interval, they stop and they talk to people. They interact with people. They relate with the people they are for policing, and the people identify them as their own police. They have their own contact, and they are their first point of contact if there's emergency.
They need to improve on community policing relationships.
These submissions could serve as an appeal to the authorities to review enforcement guidelines in order to prevent confusion. The Nigerian Army is also not resting on its oars in tackling issues of imposters.
We'll continue to sanitize the society. We'll continue this operation until we restore normalcy.
Some Lagos residents lauded the role of local vigilante in securing mostly residential areas from criminal invaders. In Lagos, Lane Leneke, NTA News.
Commuters and commercial bus operators in Lagos are beginning to appreciate the importance of social distancing to contain the spread of COVID-19. While commending government for the various measures put in place, they, however, appealed to regulators in the transport sector for moderation in intercity transportation fare. Paul Omukagu reports.
The popular Ojuelegba motorbike is a major link to different parts of Lagos metropolis. Prior to COVID-19, the scramble for buses was survival of the fittest in this part of Lagos. The relaxation of the lockdown and gradual return of commercial activities has changed the narrative. Commuters now sit comfortably in commercial vehicles in line with government directive on social distancing.
The sitting arrangement is okay, but the money is costly. At least if they are carrying it at a rate of 150, it's still okay with them and with us.
We are sitting 2-2, but the price is high because some people might not be able to afford 215 naira, if especially this is their regular route.
Transport owners say they have restructured their operations to tally with measures by government to contain the spread of the dreaded COVID-19.
For all the passengers that they used to enter to board our bus, they have to wash their hands, sanitize their hands, and they must be with their face mask.
NTA News observed compliance on the part of commuters and operators. The commuters are, however, paying additional costs in some instances as high as 100 to 150%. In Lagos, Paulo Mukabu, NTA News.
That's it from here. Ruth is standing by in Abuja to bring us more reports after this break.
I wish to once again commend the frontline workers across the country who, on a daily basis, risk everything to ensure we win this fight. For those who got infected in the line of duty, rest assured that government will do all it takes to support you and your families during this exceedingly difficult period. I will also take this opportunity to assure you all that your safety, well-being, and welfare remains paramount to our government. I am using this opportunity to express our deepest condolences to the families of all Nigerians that have lost their loved ones as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is our collective loss, and we share your grief.
As women, we guard our homes. Coronavirus, COVID-19 is real.
Wash your hands with soap and water regularly.
Use the hand sanitizer always.
Maintain social distancing and avoid crowded places.
Disinfect contact surfaces at intervals.
Wear face masks if you must go out.
Share faith, not fear.
Symptoms of COVID-19 are headache, fever, sore throat and dry cough, difficulty in breathing.
If you have this, please seek medical help immediately.
COVID-19 is real. Stay safe. This message is from the Women Wing of Christian Association of Nigeria. Woe with her!
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19. A corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 2255 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
Nigerians, let us take responsibility. Stay healthy, stay safe, and curb the spread of the virus. Take responsibility. The coronavirus spreads from one person to another. Let us avoid crowd gathering of any kind for any reason. Take responsibility. Avoid traveling from one state to another during these lockdown restrictions. Obey all the rules that are put in place. Take responsibility. Stop spreading fake news and unverified reports about the coronavirus. There is no known cure for COVID-19. Take responsibility. Observe all the measures that can help stop the spread of the virus. Together, we can do this, but only if we take responsibility. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Thanks for staying with us. Let's bring you the latest update on COVID-19. The Nigeria Center for Disease Control has announced 313 new cases of COVID-19 in Nigeria. A breakdown indicates that Lagos has 148 cases, 36 in the Federal Capital Territory, 27 in Rivers, 19 in Edo, 13 in Kano, 12 in Ogun, 11 in Ebonyi, 8 each in Nasarawa and Delta states. Others are Oyo 7, Plateau 6, Kaduna 5, Kwara 4, 3 each in Akwa Ibom and Bayelsa. Niger has 2 and Anambra 1. As at the 24th of May 2020, the total number of confirmed cases is 7,839, while 2,263 cases have been discharged, with 226 deaths recorded so far. In the meantime, Governor David Umahi of Ebonyi State is appealing to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control for the supply of more testing kits to fast-track the testing of people in isolation centers. This was while confirming 11 new cases of COVID-19 in the state. Kensley Okoro reports.
The 11 new cases are returnees from other states. The development Governor David Umahi describes as unhealthy, emphasizing that the major challenge is keeping people in isolation center for more than 14 days for lack of testing kits.
Where there are no test kits, what do? Some of them have stayed 21 days. So I think there should be enough testing kits in all the labs. So on the whole, we have 33 cases with 6 discharged.
The governor, who expressed worry over the porous nature of borders, came up with strategies to tackle the problem.
We are not happy with the porous nature of our borders. Anybody holding political or elected position in Ebonyi State will be required to be part of the monitoring team day and night. Anybody who fails to comply will leave the position.
While commending the council chairman for their commitment in the fight, Governor Umahi urged the Ebonyi people to continue to abide by all the safety measures to avoid contracting or spreading the virus. In Abakaliki, Kinsley Okoro, NTA News.
Training to enhance capacity of health workers who are on the front line in the fight against COVID-19 has continued in Taraba State. This time, the Center for Initiative and Development, in collaboration with the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, took the capacity building to the doorsteps of Federal Medical Center in Jalingo. Joseph Otson has more.
Very important to us because we are the healthcare providers, and it's a timely training for us to step it outside to see how we can manage this COVID-19 in our community
and help to minimize the transmission from human to human, and as well help the affected persons to know what is important to do at the time of maybe quarantine.
Our passion is to ensure that our frontline healthcare workers are first of all protected through the knowledge they have on personal protective equipment and infection prevention control, and they have the necessary skills and competencies, knowledge on how to manage these patients when they come through the doors and the gates of our hospitals.
This 5 weeks workshop is to build capacity of health workers saddled with the responsibility of managing COVID-19 patients without jeopardizing personal health. The training, according to the organizers, is going on in 7 states, including Adamawa, Bauchi, Benue, Gombe, Nasarawa, Yobe, and Taraba State. Over 3,000 persons are expected to benefit from the training. In Jalingo, Joseph Sound Otsen, NTA News.
And for Salah Mood in River State, let's join Jenny in Port Harcourt to guide us. Jenny, Barakada Salah.
Very much, Ruth, and welcome. The usual festivities and excitement that characterize the public holiday to mark the end of Ramadan is missing in this year's celebration. This is as Muslim faithful are observing a low-key holiday in Port Harcourt. Osinachi Abraham reports.
The mood of the city of Port Harcourt is calm as Muslims in the city are adhering to the instructions of the authorities to keep safe even while celebrating. Muslim faithful are not marking the day in the open as the country battles COVID-19.
Honestly, I would like to know, I'm not happy with the way we celebrated the Eid al-Kabir yesterday because we are not allowed to go to mosques.
Alhamdulillah, we celebrate it well and we thank God now, especially for the government. He's trying his best to protect us.
Before the emergence of COVID-19, holidays such as this provides an opportunity for Muslim and non-Muslim to socialize, recreate and catch some fun. But the reverse is the case now, as everyone is trying their best to protect themselves and family.
To God be the glory. I have some Muslim friends. They've been keeping to the rules. They pray in their houses. I called them earlier yesterday because some of them had their salah yesterday. They said I should stay in my house.
Although the Rivers State government relaxed the ongoing COVID-19 lockdown to enable Muslim faithful celebrate, precautionary measures such as social distancing, nose masking, hand washing are being observed in the state. In Port Harcourt, Osinachi Abraham, NTA News.
Thank you, Osinachi. Given the importance of good roads to the overall development of modern societies, Cross River State government says challenges of COVID-19 pandemic will not deter it from providing basic social infrastructure to meet the yearnings of the people in the state. Paul Abel reports that Governor Nayade reaffirmed his commitment to the people while inspecting work on the dualization of the Calabar-Udukbani Road project.
This section of the Calabar-Udukbani Road being one of the access routes to Cross River State capital, Calabar, though a federal road, has been taken over by the state government. Due to its economic importance, the dualization is to ease traffic gridlock, connects to a spaghetti flyover, which links the 6-lane superhighway that will eventually terminate at the Bakassi Deep Sea Port.
River State, in spite of COVID-19, is working because for us as a government, as a people, Cross River State, we locked out our state against the virus and allowed activities to continue. This construction work is very critical for us because this is where you connect to Abuja, this is where you connect to the seaport, this is where you connect to Port Harcourt, connect to the whole of the southern flank, the northern flank, and up to the Cameroons.
The people are eager to see the completion of the project very soon, as it expects to boost road transportation services within and into Calabar. In Calabar, Paul Abel, NTA News.
We are done from here. Ruth is back to you in Abuja.
Thanks, Jenny. The need to harmonize approach for a national front and strictly enforce the ban on interstate travels has again been re-echoed. This time around, it was on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria, where guests agreed that to effectively tackle emerging security challenges, the ambiguous and multilateral COVID-19 regulations in states must be harmonized. The guest also called for a more proactive approach in the repatriation of almajiris to avoid being hijacked by criminals. Let's hear from Lydia Sampson.
The coronavirus pandemic has given birth to a new wave of crime leading to emerging security challenges. This, experts say, is because the criminals are following the trend and looking for new crime routes as people devise alternative means of survival. Following the restriction of interstate movements in the country to curtail community spread of COVID-19, desperate measures like smuggling of people across states has become a new security concern.
I believe it's a big crime too, where we have given orders not to allow for cross-border traveling, and we're not even now shipping people in cars. We're trying to bus people in, or let me use it because they come inside trailers and go, so it's not even buses. So we are now trailer people into a particular region.
Government has to sit up and see how best we can actually ban the issue of Al-Majirchi, because Al-Majirchi is not in any way a prescription by Islam.
And not resting on its oars, new adaptation of crime fighting is being pursued by security agencies, even as Force Public Relations Officer DCP Frank Mba confesses that total closure of state boundaries is challenging.
If you want to lock down your external boundaries, they're very easy. You can put down your customs service, your police, your military, and then you seal off your external boundaries. But when you work to lock down your internal boundaries, where you have citizens belonging to the same states, but probably belonging to a little bit of subnationals within the same states, some of the communities in the two states straddling each other, and members even speaking the same language and flowing from one state to the other, is usually very, very cumbersome and very challenging, maintaining strict controls of those internal borders. And
the opportunity that I said we missed is firstly to eradicate the Almajiri system, and then more importantly, to take care of that component of society. They need education, whether formal or informal, or even skill acquisition. So that profiling would have allowed us to know the requirement. Now we missed out on that opportunity, and then of course what is happening today is happening.
The guests lamented the use of bush parts and other dubious means to flaunt the interstate movements restriction, which they say must be completely curtailed to avoid further spread of coronavirus. In Abuja, Lydia Samson, NTA News.
And still on the Almajiri issue, Kebbi State Government has received 61 Almajiris deported to the state by Kano State Government. Governor Abubakar Atiku Bagudu, who received the children at the IDP camp in Kalgo local government area of the state, assured his commitment to their education and for the tests to determine their COVID-19 status. Usman Abdullahi Shehu completes the report.
The repatriated Almajiri, who come from 6 local government areas of Kebbi State, comprising of 18 from Dandi local government, 13 Arugungu, 9 from Jega, 4 from Kalgo, 3 from Bagudu, and 1 from Suru local government areas. Governor Abubakar Atiku Bagudu, who handed over the returnees to their respective local government chairmen to unite them with their parents, said the decision to return the Almajiri to their state of origin was unanimously adopted by the 19 northern states governors as an effort to fight COVID-19 and address the lingering Almajiri challenge in the region. The governor announced that Kebbi State government will embark on Almajiri census shortly after Salah to repatriate non-indigens back to their home states.
We don't want children going around begging for food because they owe it to society to look out for them. As much as we have challenges in, they are our future. So we'll pay attention and ensure that they get the best of care.
He commended Kano State Governor for subjecting the returnees to take COVID-19 test before sending them back home. The Chairman State COVID-19 Task Force, Jafar Muhammad, who affirmed that all the 61 Almajiri returnees were certified negative of COVID-19, said others with positive case were left behind in Kano State at isolation centers receiving treatment. In Birnin Kebbi, Usman Abdullahi Shehu, NTA News.
All right, let's get Salamud in Kaduna in the spirit of COVID-19 restriction as we join Suleiman there to guide us. Suleiman, Eid Mubarak.
Very much, Ruth, and welcome to Kaduna. The mobile court set up by the Kaduna State government to support the enforcement of the lockdown and other anti-coronavirus measures in the state are making the desired impact through no fear or favor dispensation of justice. Majama Adamu reports.
What began as partial lockdown in Kaduna State in the wake of the global pandemic of coronavirus metamorphosed to a total lockdown due to gross violation of the partial order. Same story of non-compliance greeted the total lockdown, hence the resort by government to mobile courts to drive full enforcement. True to expectation, the courts are living up to their mandate, dispensing justice to all manner of violators brought before them, among them an army general who though escaped fine for being on duty travel, but his co-travelers were fined. The same fate befell a renowned national Islamic preacher and 2 persons in his car found without face masks. Many such violators are full of lamentations. State authorities, however, say there will be no relenting on the enforcement drive until desired objectives are achieved.
Anybody who is seen outside without his face mask, not wearing face mask, is entitled to pay the sum of 5,000 naira as fine. And for anybody who is seen outside who has refused to obey the order for lockdown, that is stay at home, he shall be liable to pay the sum of 5,000 naira as fine. And also, where there are more than 2-3 people in a car without observing physical distancing, the law provides that those people should be made to pay the sum of 7,000 naira as fine.
Already branches of the courts have been inaugurated in Zaria and Kafanchan divisions. In Kaduna, Maijama Adamu, NTA News.
Eid al-Fitr, an important festival marking the end of the month of the Ramadan fast, is usually observed with pomp and celebrations. The realities of the moment occasioned by coronavirus pandemic, however, have made observance of this year's celebration low-key under lockdown. Achari Maxwell files in this report on Eid al-Fitr in Kaduna without the usual ceremonies.
Once a bubbling arena, especially at occasions like Salah celebrations, the scenario speaks volume about the reality of COVID-19 and the sacrifices that go with the lockdown measures aimed at curtailing community spread. Unarguably, one of the topmost event centers in the Croc City, now a shadow of itself. Other event centers in the city, like Gamji Gate, suffer the same fate. No patronage, no funfair, not even by fun-seeking children.
I'm hoping that soon coronavirus will be no more.
I wish all our ibadat has been accepted.
On the streets are combined teams of security operatives enforcing the movement restriction order. All this, however, do not take away the joy of Eid al-Fitr, which marked the end of the 30-day Ramadan fast. I visited a Muslim family to get the sight and sound of the celebration under lockdown.
You find children visiting houses, Gaison Salah and the like, festivities all over. But we are all in the house, nobody can do that. We have to contain the children for them to understand equally.
Salah is all about visiting the relatives and all, but this time around you're all at home. Yeah, there's a big difference because there is no going out, we're all at home, and then now maybe you just go upstairs and sleep.
This year's Eid al-Fitr celebration in Kaduna will go down in history as one under lockdown on account of the novel coronavirus threatening global health. In Kaduna, Achari Maxwell, NTA News.
Nationwide continues with Ruth in Abuja after the break.
The number of the COVID-19 cases in Nigeria is increasing daily, with many more tests ongoing. The battle of testing, isolating, treating, and attending to the affected persons rests heavily on the shoulders of our health workers, constantly putting their lives on the line and at risk to contain this virus, save and protect the lives of millions of Nigerians. To these health workers, we at the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, on behalf of millions of Nigerians, say a big thank you for all that you have done and are doing. To the security agencies enforcing the lockdown and every other frontliner, we say thank you for putting your lives on the line to save ours. There is no amount of words that can quantify our gratitude. Thank you. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
This is a very important message. Operation Wear Your Mask, especially for people who don't old. No forget, your body no tranga like before. You not even tranga like your children or your grandchildren. So therefore, always wear your mask for this pandemic period. No they to receive visitors, so even if not your grandchildren. Make extra mask where you go fit wash, make like 2 and dash your neighbor 1. And if they come out for house, wear your mask always. And if you come back, wash your hand with soap and running water to avoid coronavirus. Make you for live long for your children and your grandchildren. No forget, Operation Wear Your Mask, especially for people who don't old. Protect me, I protect you. Now, Coalition of Societies for the Right of Older Persons in Nigeria, COSROPIN, join body with National Orientation Agency, NOA, bring on this message.
Welcome, dear. Have you washed your hands?
Inside my house again. This thing not the key black man.
I
don't know if it's misinformation or poor hygiene that will kill you first. Coronavirus is real, and good hygiene practice will save your life. Anyway, no hand washing, no eating.
I will not take care of it. How's one of the parents?
Coronavirus is real and it's on the rise. But you can help yourself and help others to be safe. Remember, we can stop the spread. It's in your hands.
This message is from the Akinfade Foundation in partnership with the National Orientation Agency with support from MacArthur Foundation.
There is a lot of fake news and report circulating, especially on social media, on the coronavirus. Do not believe or partake in the spread of these fake reports. If it is not on the official website or news from the Nigerian Center for Disease Control, NCDC, disregard such report. Only together can we beat this virus. Only together can we overcome this pandemic. Follow the instructions and guidelines provided to combat this virus. Most importantly, stay at home. Self-isolate, regardless of your status. The virus doesn't move unless we move. Let us work together to better Nigeria. Together, we can do this. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, Africa's largest television network.
Thanks for being there. The governors of Southeast Zone have agreed to engage the Nigeria Center for Disease Control on the need to scale up testing of coronavirus in the zone, as the forum directs all Igbos living outside Igbo land to obey all extant COVID-19 orders, especially the presidential directive on interstate movement. Now, this was in a communique issued by the forum after its meeting in Enugu. Susan Eze reports.
In a 7-point communique presented by the chairman of the Southeast Governors Forum and governor of Ebonyi State, Dave Umahi, the governors directed the people of the Southeast Zone to comply with the ban on interstate travels, the hygiene protocols and directives of their home governors and those of where they live, as the forum engages the National Center for Disease Control on the need to scale up COVID-19 testing in the Southeast. On security matters, the governors disagreed with the community policing composition formula contained in a recent communication to them from the Inspector General of Police.
The recent communication from the Inspector General of Police to our governors of Southeast on community policing composition is not in keeping with the agreement we reached with him during his last visit to the Southeast. In the circumstance, we cannot begin implementation of it until the program reflects our earlier agreement with the IGP. The Southeast governors and their leaders request the IGP to please revert to our initial agreement reached on community policing.
The forum, however, commended President Muhammadu Buhari on the progress of work at the second Niger Bridge and the Akanibiam International Airport, Enugu. In Enugu, Susan Eze, NTA News.
Well, lockdown or not, at home or school, the Nigerian children must be celebrated and empowered to attain their full potential of becoming responsible citizens come May 27th. Now, this is a submission of the Minister of Women Affairs while unveiling a series of events to mark the 2020 Children's Day in a lockdown. Momso Demian Deti will tell us more.
The 27th of May is just by the corner, and with the lockdown, the children may be losing hope on ever marking their special day.
The effect of coronavirus, those effective Children's Day.
But not so for the Ministry of Women Affairs. The event must be marked even with the lockdown. So, the convergence of key players here is to unveil the theme and how children can participate online right from their homes.
Of this year's Children's Day is promoting the girl-child education for sustainable development. The team is expected to intensify sensitization and awareness creation for increased enrollment, retention, and completion rate of girls in schools at all levels. It's a day that children around the world look forward to express their feelings and to celebrate childhood. However, in whatever situation we find ourselves, we must do our best to give the child its rightful place.
To support the event and assist Nigerian women, a support group championing the fight against breast and cervical cancer donated personal protective equipment to the ministry. Momso Damien Dati, NTA News.
All right, let's join Kemi in Ibadan for more Nationwide. Kemi.
Hello, Ruth, and a warm welcome to Ibadan. In the spirit of a season, wife of Osun State Governor Kafayat Oyetola has charged well-meaning Nigerians to use the Eid al-Fitr season to reach out to the less privileged in the society. Mrs. Oyetola celebrated Salah by paying unscheduled visit to a private hospital in Ile-Ife, where she foots the bill of some patients. Femi Afariogun reports.
Tears in her eyes, Mrs. Okweyemi Oladokun, who just had a cesarean session, narrated how a number of hospitals rejected her because she had no money until this private hospital accepted to operate on her. Following information received, the wife of the Osun State Governor paid an unscheduled visit to the hospital in Ile-Ife. Mrs. Oyetola paid her hospital bill and that of a family with a similar situation, while extending the gesture to other patients in the hospital.
I want to appreciate her. Thank you very much, ma.
We should try as much as possible to be our brother's keeper and assist anybody who is in need. We should try and help.
Mrs. Oyetola advised mothers to take care of their children during this period, urging people to always observe all the advisory on COVID-19. From Ile-Ife, Femi Afariogun, NTA News.
The National Youth Service Corps has reiterated commitment to pursuing and integrating values that will make its mandate felt in every nooks and crannies of a nation. Correspondent Larry Belay reports that Corps members visited some communities within Ibadan Metropolis where they put smiles on the faces of orphans and other less privileged.
The National Youth Service Corps in Oyo State went to communities taking into account the current realities in the country to enlighten on ways to curb the spread of COVID-19. And they did not go empty-handed, distributing foodstuff to the less privileged.
Because the pandemic is not even, it didn't take us by surprise because we already have programs on ground to take care of it.
As is do this kind of palliative to remember us in this our community that we are worthy to be recognized.
The Corps members and NYC officials were also at the homes of the elderly and orphanages.
Pray that one day our children will join this group too.
I say my gratitude to God Almighty for the person I know is the General Gowon that started this thing. We always pray for him.
The Corps stated that over the years they've been vanguards of unity, service and humility, which has positioned them to be able to participate in surmounting challenges that may face the nation. In Ibadan, Larry Bilei, NTA News.
And that's it from Ibadan. It's back to Ruth in Abuja for more on Nationwide. Barka Salah.
Barka Salah, Kemi, thank you for that. As part of the activities marking this year's Eid al-Fitr, the Nigerian Air Force has organized 2020 Chief of Air Staff lunch for the officers and men of the force in Katsina. Let's hear from Abdul Malik Hassan.
A reception for the officers and men from different military formations is aimed at expressing gratitude to individual and collective sacrifices, to foster spirit of comradeship, as well boost the morale of the soldiers in protecting the territorial integrity of the country against any form of external aggression. Addressing the troops, the Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Sadiq Baba Abubakar, represented by Air Officer Commanding Special Operations Command, Air Vice Marshal Charles Owo, commended the troops for marking this year's Eid al-Fitr celebration.
Notwithstanding, we should bear in mind that a lot is at stake in this war against banditry and kidnapping. We must therefore not allow ourselves to be taken unawares, and hence I enjoin all personnel to remain disciplined and not to relent in the effort towards ensuring safety and security of our citizens.
He said the force is committed to addressing the lingering security challenges in the state, which he said necessitated the deployment of the Air Force Special Forces to the frontline local government areas of Katsina State. Air Vice Marshal Charles Owo further commended the effort of the air officers for their commitment towards ensuring the security in the country, especially the Northwest. He urged them to comply with the health professionals' directive to guard themselves against the COVID-19 pandemic. In Katsina, Abdul Malik Hassan, NTA News.
Still on security, away from Eid al-Fitr, the Nigerian military says the air component of Operation Hadarin Daji has neutralized close to 200 bandits in multiple airstrikes conducted at Ibrahim Maibai's camp in Jibia local government area of Katsina State and Kurmin Kura in Zurmi local government area of Zamfara State. A statement signed by Coordinator, Directorate of Defense Media Operations, Major General John Eneche. The airstrikes were executed on 22nd and 23rd May 2020 after a series of intelligence missions led to the confirmation that the two locations were being used as hideouts for some notorious bandit leaders, whilst also serving as collection points for rusted cattle. The air component employing Nigerian Air Force, ground attack aircraft and helicopter gunships destroyed the makeshift structures in the camps, killing the bandit leaders and their fighters. Human intelligence sources later confirmed that close to 200 armed bandits were killed in the airstrikes at the target locations. The chief of the air staff has directed that additional assets be deployed to cover Kaduna, Niger, Nasarawa and Kogi states to frustrate any attempt of the bandits to relocate to adjoining states. Let's talk sports. Nigeria Volleyball Federation to give palliatives to the National League clubs across the country to reduce the effect of COVID-19. Olumide Eguntola reports that the sport writers also benefited from the palliatives.
Just like in other spheres of life, this is not the best of time for volleyball players and officials due to the impact of coronavirus. This leads to the Federation's resolve to share over 1 million naira palliatives to the 18 national male and female volleyball clubs in Nigeria. The president of the Nigeria Volleyball Federation, Musa Nimrod, said the palliatives will, among other things, strengthen the ties between the federation and state associations as well as clubs. Meanwhile, he also extended the palliatives to members of the Sports Writers Association of Nigeria, SWAN, Kaduna State Chapter, as members converge on Ahmadu Bello Stadium to partake in the distribution of palliatives donated by their patron. The food items donated by Nimrod and supported by the national president of SWAN, Ono Sirao, is to cushion the economic effect of the coronavirus pandemic that the sports writers are facing.
I realized that quite a lot of the journalists, 8 to 9 months, they have not received salaries, and I felt within me to assist them.
There is no household in Nigeria today that you take all these things into and they will not be happy.
Our desire is to see that nobody sleep hungry.
About 30 members of SWAN in Kaduna State benefited from the palliatives. With sports updates, Olumide Guntola.